By the time Judge Harrow took the bench, the air in Courtroom 3 already felt like it had been argued into submission. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Men in summer weight suits sat with their legs crossed and their jaws set, whispering into legal pads as if they were investors at a board meeting instead of citizens watching a murder trial. Wives in pearl earrings looked straight ahead with the expression people wore at expensive funerals, composed, offended, determined not to smudge their mascara. Reporters lined the back wall. 2 local camera crews had been denied recording access, so their correspondents settled for live updates from the hallway, phones held chest high like candles. Darren Brooks sat in the second row, aisle seat, shoulders broad enough to make the man beside him edge away by habit. He wore a clean button-down with sleeves rolled once at the forearm, a haircut clipped close, and the stillness of someone who had trained himself to bleed, stress inward, never out. Retired Navy SEAL, 11 deployments, 3 commendations that meant nothing at 3 in the morning when sleep peeled open and old sounds came back. In Harbor Point, nobody cared much about his service unless there was a parade or a fundraiser. Mostly he was just another veteran with a pension and a stack of sealed VA records he preferred not to discuss. At counsel table sat the defendants, Caleb Voss, Trent Halley, Mason Kincaid. 22, 23, maybe 24, expensive watches, polished shoes, matching expressions of mild irritation, as if the entire proceeding were an administrative delay in otherwise important lives. Their fathers occupied the front row behind them. Douglas Voss, whose development company name sat in chrome letters on half the city's waterfront permits. Dr. Randall Halley, director of Harbor Point Medical, and Chief Nolan Kincaid, currently on temporary advisory leave, while his son stood trial. Legacy built into bone. The charge was felony murder. The victim, a dock worker named Ivo Marin, had died behind Pier 9 after what the prosecution called a sustained group assault. The defense called it an unfortunate altercation complicated by intoxication and pre-existing health factors. Harbor Point called it complicated because Harbor Point needed to. On the stand that morning was the prosecution's most fragile witness, 17-year-old Tasha Green, who had been walking home from her shift at a bait shop when she heard shouting and saw 3 men pinning someone against corrugated steel. She had given a statement once, then recanted, then given another statement with a public defender present. By now she looked like she regretted every breath that had brought her into that room. "Miss Green," Assistant District Attorney Lena Ortiz said softly, "can you identify any of the individuals you saw near Mr. Marin that evening?" Tasha gripped the rail of the witness box. Her knuckles went white. Her eyes flicked toward the defense table, then away. Darren watched from the gallery and felt his own pulse settle into that familiar pre-adrenal rhythm, the one that came before contact, before breach, before someone made a move nobody else had seen yet. The back doors opened. No one turned at first. Court doors opened and closed all day. Late attorneys, deputies, clerks carrying files. Then there was a wet sound, a paw skidding on tile, and a bailiff looked up with a frown. A dog stepped into the aisle. He was a Belgian Malinois, mud-soaked to the chest, coat darkened from rain and harbor muck, ribs visible beneath a lean frame. Not large, but all edge and tendon. One ear had a nick near the tip. His gait was controlled despite the slick floor. He didn't sniff the spectators, didn't pace, didn't bark. He moved straight down the center aisle as if he had memorized the room. Conversations cut off in staggered pieces until there was only the hum of fluorescent lights and a distant car horn from outside. Even the court reporter's fingers stopped mid-line. The The dog reached the witness stand, turned once, and sat perfectly still beside Tasha Green's knees, head up, eyes fixed forward. Darren rose halfway before he realized he was moving. Instinct, old and immediate. Not panic, pattern recognition. Judge Harrow slammed his gavel. Order! Bailiff, remove that animal immediately. Who let this happen? Two deputies approached from opposite sides. The dog didn't react. No lip curl, no tension surge, no scatter behavior you'd expect from a true stray trapped in bright lights and human noise. He remained anchored, shoulder close to Tasha's shin without touching her, like he understood both distance and assignment. Darren's throat tightened, not with fear, but with certainty. This wasn't random. He sat back down slowly, eyes never leaving the dog. In a harbor point, things happened by arrangement. Contracts arranged, reports arranged, outcomes arranged. Darren had come to court because he'd seen too many arranged outcomes overseas and at home, and because Ivo Marin had once handed him black coffee at 4:30 in the morning on Dock C and called him Commander, even after Darren told him 6 times he wasn't in anymore. Small kindnesses counted. So did what happened to men who couldn't buy protection. Now this mud-streaked Malinois had walked into a courtroom and selected the one person too frightened to speak. Darren knew enough to trust that kind of signal. The judge called for recess, but before anyone could clear the room, Lena Ortiz leaned toward the witness stand. Tasha, she said, look at me. You're safe. Tell us what you need to tell us. Tasha stared at the dog, tears collecting but not falling. Her voice came out as a thread. He was there that night. A ripple of laughter broke from the defense table, ugly and sharp. Caleb Voss's attorney, Martin Gleason, stood instantly. Your Honor, this is absurd. We move for mistrial based on prejudicial theatrics and complete evidentiary contamination. Judge Harrow's face hardened. Ms. Ortiz? Lena rose, jaw tight. Your Honor, the witness is distressed. She's indicating the animal was present at the scene, which may be relevant. Relevant? Gleason snapped. Are we putting a dog on the stand now? More laughter, this time from the gallery. Someone muttered, circus. Darren watched Tasha fold into herself, shoulders caving, breath hitching. The same look he'd seen on village interpreters, junior operators, civilian assets, people who reached for one thread of truth and got shouted down by men in clean collars. The deputies took hold of the dog's collarless neck and hindquarters, trying to lift and pull him back. He resisted once, just a planted brace, no aggression, then rose when one deputy tightened grip behind his shoulder, trained compliance under pressure. Darren felt it like a tap against old wiring, not stray, not even close. As the dog was dragged toward the side exit, Tasha shut down completely. On resumed questioning, she answered in monosyllables, then, I don't remember, then silence. By the time cross-examination began, Gleason had her tangled in timelines and streetlight angles and prior inconsistent statements. He used the dog like a blade. So today, after months of preparation, your memory is suddenly assisted by an unidentified animal? No answer. Miss Green, are you seeking attention? No answer. Did the prosecution coach you to dramatize? Objection, Lena said. Sustained, said the judge, but the damage was done. Every juror had seen the witness retreat. Every reporter had gotten what they needed. Chaos, not certainty. By lunch break, talk in the hallway had shifted from murder to spectacle. Hashtag courtroom dog trended locally before closing arguments even resumed. Darren stood alone at the vending machines, palms flat against cold metal, letting the fluorescent buzz drown out the rising roar in his head. He had learned the hard way that rage felt useful, and usually wasn't. He breathed in counts. 4 in, hold 4, out 6, until the edge dulled. A voice beside him said, "You saw it too." Lena Ortiz held a paper cup of burnt coffee and looked like she had slept 3 hours in 2 days. Early 30s, severe bun coming loose at the temples, dark circles she didn't bother concealing. "Saw what?" Darren asked. "That dog." She watched him carefully. "Everyone else saw a stunt. You didn't." Darren shrugged once. "Dog had discipline." "You a trainer?" "Used to handle K-9 teams on joint ops," he corrected himself. "Not officially mine. Worked alongside." Lena nodded, filing the detail. "Animal control took him. If he's unclaimed 48 hours, he's done." Darren didn't answer. He was already answering in his head. That afternoon, the prosecution limped through testimony from a medical examiner and a dock foreman who admitted he'd heard shouting, but couldn't identify voices. Defense counsel shredded both. By adjournment, the jury looked tired, and tired juries defaulted to the easiest story. The easiest story was always the one with money behind it. Outside, Harbor Point's evening fog rolled in from the marina, turning streetlights into halos. Darren drove his aging pickup to municipal animal intake on the edge of the industrial district, where chain-link fences rattled in the wind and bleach fought a losing battle against fear and urine. A clerk with chipped blue nail polish looked up from a monitor. "Can I help you?" "Dog from courthouse today," Darren said. "Belgian Malinois. No collar." She clicked through intake logs. "Case transfer from Sheriff's Transport. Marked as aggressive, stray pending behavior eval." She squinted at him. "You owner?" "No." "Then no release without hold expiration." "He bite anyone?" She checked. "No." "Lunge?" "No." "Then why aggressive?" She gave him a tired smile. "Because unidentified shepherd mix in public facility defaults to caution code. You want to contest it? Fill out these forms and pay evaluation and boarding fees. If nobody claims, youth list runs fast." She slid a clipboard toward him. Darren stared at the paper, lines and boxes and liability waivers. He had spent years signing things. After-action reports, condolence statements, discharge documents, non-disclosure addendums. Most signatures had felt like endings. This one felt like stepping on a live wire. He filled in his name in block letters. Darren Brooks. By the time a kennel tech brought the dog out, rain had started again. The Malinois walked on a slip lead without pulling, ears forward, body alert but contained. Mud still crusted his legs. A shallow scrape marked his flank. Darren crouched, palms visible. "Hey!" The dog watched him, assessing. "No sudden moves," Darren said quietly, more to himself than the animal. "You and me both." The dog leaned forward, sniffed once near Darren's wrist, then sat, straight spine, eyes up, waiting. Old muscle memory unlocked in Darren's mouth before he could stop it. "Place." The dog stayed. "Down." Immediate compliance. Not luck, not coincidence. Darren signed the final release and took the lead. In the parking lot, he stood with rain soaking his shoulders, dog beside him, city traffic hissing on wet asphalt beyond the fence. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then answered. A male voice, smoothed by money and habit, said, "Mr. Brooks, you seem to be inserting yourself into a sensitive civic process. That would be unwise." Click. No threat explicit enough to report. Just a hand on the back of the neck. He put the phone away and looked down at the dog. The Malinois looked back without flinching. In Harbor Point, people like Voss and Halley and Kincaid didn't need to shout. They owned enough doors that they could close them quietly and call it order. If the case collapsed, 3 men walked free. One dead dock worker became a cautionary footnote, and every witness in town learned the same lesson. Truth was for people who could afford consequences. Darren had spent years telling himself retirement meant disengagement. Keep your head down. Take your meds when the nights got bad. Fix boat engines part-time. Don't chase ghosts. Don't pick fights with systems designed to outlast you. But this wasn't a ghost. This was a trained dog who had crossed a city to sit beside a terrified kid and hold position under command pressure in a courtroom full of predators. Signals mattered. Ignore enough of them and people died. He opened the passenger door of the truck. Up. The Malinois jumped in, turned once, and sat facing forward like he'd ridden tactical transport his whole life. Darren shut the door and stood for a second longer in the rain, breathing. Tomorrow the trial would continue, with or without him. The fathers would call favors. The papers would run op-eds about due process and hysteria. Somewhere, Tasha Green would spend the night wondering whether Speaking had just signed her own sentence. Darren climbed behind the wheel, hands steady on the ignition. "Okay," he said to the dog, to the dark windshield, to whatever part of himself had just stopped pretending. "Let's see where you were trying to lead." The wipers beat a hard rhythm across the windshield, pushing rain aside just long enough to reveal Harbor Point in pieces. Neon liquor signs, closed bait shacks, the glint of black water between warehouses. Darren kept both hands on the wheel and watched the dog from the corner of his eye at every stoplight. The Malinois sat upright in the passenger seat, weight balanced, never pacing, never whining. When Darren slowed near the courthouse intersection, the dog's ears pricked and his body leaned half an inch toward the right side window, then settled when they passed. At the next block, near the road that ran down to the piers, that same lean returned, stronger this time. "Yeah," Darren muttered. "You got somewhere." He drove past his apartment complex once without turning in. The dog stayed calm until Darren crossed Harbor Avenue toward the Marina District. Then the animal gave a low, contained whine. Not panic, not distress, just pressure. At a red light near Pier 6, he lifted one paw and touched the dashboard, eyes fixed ahead. Directional behavior, memory trigger. Darren didn't follow it all the way tonight, not blind, not in rain, not without backup or a legal lane to operate in. He made a slow loop, let the dog watch the roads, then turned uphill toward his building above an old engine repair shop. Inside the apartment, he moved like he was back in pre-mission routine. Clear the space, remove hazards, establish structure. He dragged a heavy moving blanket into the corner near the kitchen, set down a steel water bowl, and found an unopened bag of kibble left from the mutt he'd fostered 3 years earlier for a week and failed to keep. The Malinois stood in the center of the room, dripping harbor water onto worn floorboards, waiting for instruction. Darren crouched. "Place." The dog moved to the blanket and held. Darren exhaled slowly. "Good." He checked the scrape on the dog's flank. Superficial. No deep puncture, no swelling. Up close, he could see faint, pressure callus marks near the forelegs, and a healed rub line around the neck where a working collar had once sat for long hours. There was a tattoo blur inside one ear, too faded to read cleanly in apartment light. Not stray. When Darren set the food down, the dog didn't dive into it. He looked to Darren first, waited, then ate in controlled bursts, glancing up between mouthfuls. Handler condition permission checks. Darren felt something in his chest tighten and loosen at the same time. His phone vibrated on the counter. "Lena Ortiz," he answered. "Brooks. Please tell me you didn't just disappear with the only weirdly relevant animal in this case." "I signed legal release. He was ours from youth list." Silence. Then, "Where are you?" "Home." Another pause, then the sound of paper shuffling and a door closing on her end. I can be there in 20. Lena arrived in a navy raincoat, trial binder under one arm, and exhaustion written across her face. She stepped inside, spotted the dog on the blanket, and stopped. He's calmer than half my witnesses, she said. He's trained, Darren replied. Obedience, pressure, tolerance, positional control around crowds. Maybe patrol, maybe protection, not pet store school. Lena crouched carefully, offered the back of her hand. The dog sniffed, then looked past her at Darren. See that? Darren said. He's checking my read before deciding yours. So he trusts you. He recognizes a command structure. Lena stood, taking that in. The defense filed emergency motion tonight, says the courtroom incident tainted jury perception and that I encouraged theatrics. Harrow denied mistrial without prejudice, but he warned me. One more circus moment, and he'll carve my case down to bone. She looked toward the dog again. Can you prove what you just told me? Training, not random behavior? I can demonstrate probability, not certainty, but enough for a hearing if we anchor it right. Do it, she said, immediate. Because tomorrow, they're putting on a private security consultant to say this animal is feral and unpredictable. Darren gave a humorless smile. Unpredictable dogs don't hold a down stay in fluorescent chaos while deputies grab at them. Lena finally set her binder down. Tasha's aunt got 2 calls tonight. No one spoke, just breathing. Then a text from a blocked app. Keep your girl off the stand. Darren's jaw tightened. Lena saw it and pointed a finger at him. Do not go freelance on me. Wasn't planning to. That sounded like a lie. It was an incomplete sentence. He nodded at the dog. I think he can take us to scene-adjacent location. He indicated toward Marina Roads. Tonight? Too wet, too dark, too easy to challenge. Lena considered, then nodded. Tomorrow, early. I'll get an investigator and body cams. If he gives us a lead, we preserve, call it in, and touch nothing until warrants. Good. On her way out, she paused by the door. You name him yet? Darren looked back at the Malinois. Square posture, steady eyes, all straight lines and discipline. Rook, he said. Lena gave a tired grin. Fitting. Moves in direct lines and ruins people who underestimate him. By dawn, the rain had thinned to mist. Harbor Point smelled like diesel, salt, and wet concrete. Lena's investigator, Cam Dugan, met them in an unmarked county sedan near the old fish cannery lot. Cam was mid-40s, former patrol, the kind of man who spoke rarely and recorded everything. He clipped a body cam to his jacket and one to Lena's lapel. Darren fitted Rook with a plain working harness he'd bought at a 24-hour farm supply store. No tactical patches, Lena said, approving. Last thing I need is defense photos claiming we staged a war dog unit. Darren nodded and gave Rook a quiet command. Heel. They started on foot from the lot. Rook moved with purpose, no cycling air currents, then dropping to ground scent in short sweeps. At each cross street, he hesitated only long enough to choose direction, then pulled toward the eastern slips where development had stalled years earlier and chain-link fences rusted around half-demolished docks. They reached a locked gate, stamped with a weather-faded sign, Mariners Cove Redevelopment, property of Voss Harbor Holdings, pending transfer. Cam whistled under his breath. That's awkward. Rook whined and pawed once at the bottom of the gate, then turned left along the perimeter fence until he found a section where storm runoff had washed out soil beneath. He lowered himself, crawled through, and looked back. Damn it, Lena muttered. Cam, note time and location. We're outside legal access. Darren studied the fence, then the street. No cameras visible from this angle, no private patrol in sight yet. "Either we walk away," he said, "or we call for warrant." With nothing but dog looked interested. Lena stared at the gap, weighing risk against evaporation. Tide, weather, cleanup crews. Evidence didn't wait politely. She made the call. "Document entry under exigent preservation concern. No touching without instruction." They crawled through. Inside the marina was a graveyard of warped planks and collapsed awnings. Fuel pumps stood dead and tagged. Gulls screamed overhead. Rook moved down a rotted finger dock, stopped at a section where boards had buckled, and began pawing at one plank near a rusted cleat. Darren knelt, but didn't touch. Alert behavior. Focused. Cam filmed close. Lena called dispatch for uniformed support and on-call crime scene techs. Response time. 19 minutes. Rook kept insisting. Paw, nose jab, look to Darren, repeat. 19 minutes on wet, unstable wood felt like an hour. Darren heard an engine somewhere beyond the breakwater and scanned the shoreline. A black SUV slowed on the access road, idled, then rolled on. When the first patrol unit arrived, they popped the plank under Cam's continuous recording. Beneath it, wrapped in black electrician's tape, sat a crushed smartphone in a zip freezer bag gone cloudy with moisture. Nearby, snagged on a nail head below the board line, were shreds of blue tarp with dark brown staining. Lena didn't swear often. This time she did, softly. "Bag it," she told the tech, voice level again. "Separate containers. Gloves change between items, full chain logs." By noon, the defense had already heard. By 2 o'clock, Martin Gleason was in front of microphones on courthouse steps, outraged and immaculate. "This is vigilante theater," he announced. "A traumatized former serviceman trespasses on private property with a mystery dog and suddenly discovers evidence tied to my clients. It would be laughable if it weren't such a grotesque abuse of process." Darren watched it on a muted TV in Lena's office while Rook lay at his boots. "Leak speed's impressive," Lena said. "Someone in dispatch or patrol called someone who called someone." "Or they had eyes on the marina already," Darren replied. Her phone rang again, then again. She silenced both and opened her laptop instead. Her expression hardened. "You're trending," she said. "Good or bad?" She turned the screen so he could see local headlines stacked like gunfire. Broken hero or public threat. Former SEAL inserts himself in murder trial. Exclusive. VIA files raised questions about Brooks' fitness. Underneath was a blurred photo of a document page, his name, partial diagnosis codes, medication history, sealed records, not supposed to exist outside protected systems. Darren felt heat rise from his chest to his scalp, then forced it down. Where'd they get that? Illegal leak. Probably laundered through anonymous source. We'll report it, but by the time anyone investigates, narrative's already set. As if on cue, Lena's paralegal knocked and entered with a printout. "Ms. Ortiz, this came by courier. No return." Lena opened it. One line, block letters. "Heroes retire for a reason." She set it down without comment. Darren read it once, memorized the spacing, the pressure marks where the pen had dug hardest. "Don't," Lena said quietly, reading his face. "I'm breathing," he said. "Keep doing that. I need you useful, not arrested." That night, Darren walked Rook along the alley behind his apartment, keeping to routine because routine was armor. Sit at curbs, wait at doors, eye contact before crossing. Rook learned fast, as if remembering rather than learning. When they returned to the lot, the smell hit first. Gasoline and burning paint. Flames climbed the side of Darren's pickup, orange tongues reflecting in the rain puddles. A rear tire blew with a muffled pop. Someone across the street shouted for a fire extinguisher. By the time the engine company arrived, the cab was a black shell, and the windshield had melted inward like plastic skin. A patrol officer took his statement with practiced boredom. "Any enemies?" Darren almost laughed. "You got all night?" The officer wrote nothing for several seconds, then resumed. "We'll review nearby cameras." Across the lot, taped to a light pole at eye level, was another note in the same block print as before. "Heroes retire for a reason." Darren didn't touch it. He photographed it, sent it to Lena, then stood in drizzle while firefighters hosed steam off twisted metal. Rook pressed against his leg, body steady, eyes scanning dark corners of the lot. Protective proximity. No panic. Lena arrived 10 minutes later, hair frizz from rain, fury barely contained. "I can request emergency witness protection adjunct for you." "I'm not a witness yet." "You're a target." "Same thing in practical terms." He nodded toward the burned truck. "They're telling me to back off." "Will you?" Darren looked at the ruin for a long beat. "No." "Then we stop playing defense," she said. "Tomorrow I file for expanded warrants, marina ownership transfers, police dispatch logs from night of assault, ER intake records before death pronouncement. If there's a cover-up, it leaves paperwork." He gave a short nod. "And the phone?" "Digital Lab says maybe recoverable if board corrosion isn't total. We'll know soon." The next morning, Lena sent Darren to Harbor Point Veterinary Imaging for Rook's flank scrape and a full intake scan before any courtroom use petition. Chain of documentation mattered now more than ever. Dr. Emily Chen, practical and brisk, ran her scanner over Rook's shoulders, then slowed, frowning at the monitor. "That's odd," she said. "What?" "Microchip read came through on secondary frequency. Older law enforcement batch type." She turned the screen. Registration data populated in clipped lines: K9 unit, Harbor Point Police Department K9, ID RK-1, 7 handler, of record Officer J. Merritt. Status decommissioned behavioral instability transfer. Auth Acting Chief N. Kincaid. Darren stared at the name. Kincaid. Dr. Chen looked between him and the screen. "You know these people?" "Unfortunately." Lena was on speaker within 3 minutes. "Read that again," she said, voice sharp as glass. Dr. Chen did. Lena exhaled once. "Do not release original scan file to anyone but me under subpoena acknowledgement. I'm sending an investigator now." Darren crouched beside Rook after the call ended. "RK-17, he said quietly. "You had a badge before you had a blanket?" Rook held his gaze, then nudged Darren's wrist with his nose. By afternoon, Lena had emergency motions drafted. "If Kincaid's department logged this dog as unstable and dumped him," she said, pacing her office, "and that same dog appears at our key witness during trial, then either fate has a dark sense of humor or somebody buried an asset." "Decommissioned is often code," Darren said. "Could mean injured, could mean handler transfer, could mean politically inconvenient." "Exactly." Cam entered with a thumb drive from Digital Forensics and set it on the table like it might explode. "We got partial extraction from Marina phone," he said. "Video heavily corrupted. Audio's cleaner." Lena plugged it in. The screen showed jittering darkness, then flashes. Corrugated steel wall, a figure on knees, motion blur of shoes and swinging arms. A grunt. Someone laughing. A voice, breathless and young. "Hit him again!" Static. Then another voice, clearer, angry with alcohol and entitlement. "Relax. Dad already fixed the first report." The clip stuttered, froze, resumed for half a second on a profile that looked like Mason Kincaid before collapsing into digital snow. No one spoke for a moment. Then Lena whispered, "There it is." Not just violence, interference. Same night, same circle. Darren felt the case tilt in his mind, old map lines redrawing. This was no longer three rich sons in one deadly brawl. This was fathers, institutions, prearranged paperwork, and a dog that had survived being erased. Lena straightened and snapped back into motion. We widened scope now. Conspiracy and obstruction referrals. Independent warrants only. State level, if I can pry them loose. We firewall from local chain where possible. She looked directly at Darren. And I need you formal. Not as grieving citizen, not as guy with a dog. Expert petition, K-9 behavior, scent retention, handler, suppression response in high-stress environments. You explained to the court why what happened in that courtroom was assignment memory, not chance. Defense had already painted him unstable. Taking the stand would hand them a bigger target. His deployments, insomnia, the mission that still woke him choking 3 nights a week. He thought about the burned truck, Tosh's silent phone threats, Evo Marin on Dock C handing over bitter coffee with rough hands and no agenda. File it, Darren said. I'll testify. Lena nodded once, decisive. Then we do this clean. No freelancing, no heroics, process only. Darren rested a hand on Rook's neck. The dog leaned in, steady as a post. Process, Darren repeated, and for the first time in a long while, the word didn't sound like surrender. Process, Darren repeated, and for the first time in a long while, the word didn't sound like surrender. Lena was about to answer when Cam's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and his expression went flat. Uniform unit at your apartment, he told Darren. And animal control. Darren's hand tightened on Rook's neck. For what? Cam turned the phone so they could see the dispatched note he'd gotten from a contact still willing to bend rules for him. Property retrieval assist. Municipal K9 Asset RK-17. Lena swore, grabbed her coat, and was out the door before either man moved. By the time they reached Darren's building, 2 patrol cruisers and an animal control van were already in the lot. Red and blue lights painted the wet pavement in nervous pulses. 3 officers stood near the stairwell entrance with a clipboard and the brittle confidence of men delivering someone else's order. Rook gave a low, warning rumble in Darren's truck cab. Stay, Darren said quietly, and the dog froze. A Sergeant Darren didn't recognize stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, we have a municipal claim order for that canine. Harbor Point PD property. You're required to surrender immediately. Signed by who? Lena snapped, already walking, badge out. The sergeant glanced at her, recalibrating. Assistant City Solicitor. Verified through on-call judge. Which judge? Emergency duty docket. Judge Bell. Lena held out a hand. Let me see the order. He hesitated, then passed it over. Lena scanned the page, jaw tightening with each line. This isn't a warrant, she said. It's a temporary civil possession directive based on an affidavit from Acting Chief Kincaid claiming unauthorized retention of department property. No notice, no hearing, no chance to respond. Ma'am, I'm not here to argue legal theory. You are now, she said, because this dog is a material witness support asset in an active homicide trial, and you are one body cam clip away from spoliation and witness intimidation exposure if you remove him without court notice to prosecution. One of the younger officers shifted uncomfortably. The sergeant looked at Darren. Sir, open the vehicle. Darren did not move. You got probable cause for seizure? Civil order. Then it's civil. You can't force entry on my truck without conversion. Cam stepped in, calm and dry. He's right. The sergeant's mouth hardened. Don't do this. Lena was already on her phone, pacing 3 steps away, voice clipped and lethal. Clerk's office? This is ADA Ortiz. I need Judge Harrow now. Yes, now. You can wake him. Standoff stretched. Rain ticked against metal. Rook stayed silent but alert in the passenger seat, eyes tracking every officer. Finally, Lena ended the call and strode back. Stand down, she told the sergeant. Harrow issued oral stay pending hearing at 0800. Any seizure before that is contempt risk. The sergeant cursed under his breath, waved his officers back, and signaled the van to pull out. As the lights faded down the street, Lena exhaled once, hard. They're not even pretending subtle anymore. Darren looked at the wet skid marks where the van had been. If they take him, he disappears. Or gets relabeled unstable again and put down under policy compliance, Camp said. No one argued. Lena turned to Darren. You don't leave him alone tonight? Not for 5 minutes. And you don't sleep through your phone? Darren gave a short nod. What did this cost us? She held his gaze. Everything gets costlier from here. At 8 in the morning, Courtroom 3 was standing room only again. This time, the crowd smelled blood. Defense counsel came loaded for public execution. Gleason had 3 associates, a private investigator, and a consultant with silver hair and television posture. The fathers sat in front row, faces carved from patient contempt. Rook lay under Darren's chair beside counsel table on a short lead, head on paws, still as stone. Judge Harrow entered, took one look at the packed room, and said, If anyone in this courtroom treats this hearing like entertainment, I will clear the gallery. No one moved. Gleason began. Your Honor, the prosecution's entire pivot rests on tainted evidence recovered through unlawful trespass by a psychologically compromised civilian with no law enforcement authority and a dog of disputed control history. We move to suppress all marina-derived physical and digital evidence, strike anticipated canine behavior testimony under reliability standards, and remand municipal canine asset RK-17 to Harbor Point PD. He made it sound clean, procedural, reasonable. Then he called his consultant, who testified that feral drift behavior could explain Rook's courtroom movement, that handler fantasy projection was common among veterans with unresolved trauma, and that false signaling by canines under stress rendered any directional tracking anecdotal at best. He said Darren's name like a diagnosis. Lena objected where she could, cut what she could, but Harrow let more in than she wanted. Then came cross-examination of Darren. Limited hearing, not trial testimony, but brutal anyway. Mr. Brooks, Gleason said, smiling politely, how many hours did you sleep the night before you entered Voss property? 3? How many prescriptions are you currently taking for anxiety-related symptoms? Objection, Lena said immediately. Scope. Gleason spread his hands. Credibility and perceptual reliability. Harrow paused, then overruled. Answer. Darren's jaw flexed. 2. Did you or did you not tell a VA clinician, quote, sometimes I still hear impact sounds when it rains? Lena shot up. Sealed medical records. Foundation established through publicly available source reporting, Gleason said, feigning regret. Harrow's face darkened at that, but he still looked to Darren. The silence stretched like wire. I said it, Darren answered. Gleason nodded, satisfied, and moved on as if he had just proven gravity. By noon, Harrow ruled from the bench. Given unresolved questions around initial property access and preservation sequence, the court provisionally excludes marina physical items and derivative digital extraction from jury presentation, pending independent warrant-backed reintroduction. This is without prejudice to later admissibility. A pulse of triumph moved through the defense table. Harrow continued, voice firmer. As to canine status, ownership and evidentiary handling are disputed. Until resolved, RK-17 will be held at County Evidence Kennels under neutral supervision. No euthanasia, no transfer, no retraining. Court order. Darren felt Rook rise beside him before the bailiff even approached. The dog looked up once, waiting for command. Darren swallowed the burn in his throat and gave it. Go with. Rook moved with the handler from County Kennel Services without resistance. That hurt more than Darren expected. As the dog disappeared through the side door, Tasha Green entered from the witness corridor for a separate scheduling matter, saw the empty space under Darren's chair, and stopped dead, her face drained of color. Lena reached her first. Tasha, hey, look at me. I can't, the girl whispered. I can't do this. We can adjust. We can ask for closed-circuit testimony. They know where my cousin goes to school. Her eyes darted toward the gallery, then down. I said I don't remember. That's all I'm saying now. She pulled free and let the victim advocate guide her out. Darren watched her go and knew that something had cracked in a way law books couldn't seal. By the time court recessed, the headlines were already writing themselves again. Key evidence barred. Prosecution theory. Stumbles. Dog removed. Outside the courthouse, Douglas Voss took a call, smiling. For the first time since Rook walked into Courtroom 3, Darren felt the edge of real doubt. Not whether the truth existed, but whether it would survive long enough to be heard. Lena locked herself in the ADA records room because it was the only place in the building without windows and with a door thick enough to mute hallway noise. She set both palms on a metal filing cabinet and breathed through the shaking she had hidden from everyone else. She had lost hearings before, lost motions, lost judges, lost clean narratives to dirtier money. But this one felt personal in a way she had promised herself never to allow again. When she was 26, still trying to prove she was harder than fear, she'd pushed a domestic violence witness to stay the course after 2 recantations. We can protect you, she had said. Trust process. 3 weeks later, the witness was found in a motel bathtub 60 miles away, wrists bruised, lungs full of water. The official ruling said accidental overdose. Lena read the autopsy photos alone and never forgave herself for how certain she had sounded. That case had taught her 2 truths she carried like shrapnel. Systems fail quietly, and confidence can kill. Now she had asked Tasha Green for courage while men with resources mapped every weak point around her. She had asked Darren to trust a legal process that had just taken his dog, his evidence, and half his credibility in a single morning. She had watched him answer questions about nightmares in a room full of people, pretending they were facts, not wounds. Her phone vibrated with 20 unread messages. Press, supervisors, one from her mother that just said, "Call me when you can breathe." She didn't call. Instead, she sank down onto a banker's box and pressed her fists to her mouth until the urge to cry passed into something colder. A soft knock hit the records room door. Lena? Darren's voice. She almost said she was fine. The old reflex rose, polished and automatic. She swallowed it. Come in. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and waited. No questions. No pressure. Just presence. That, more than anything, undid her. I told her we could keep her safe, Lena said, eyes on the floor. Tasha, I said it like I meant it. You did mean it. Meaning doesn't stop people with money and uniforms on speed dial. She laughed once, rough. Do you know what my boss said after the hearing? Maybe narrow theory and salvage a manslaughter plea. That's code for let the fathers breathe and call it justice. Darren leaned against the shelf across from her. You saying you want out? No. She looked up, and there was anger there, but fear too. I'm saying I am very, very tired of asking vulnerable people to stand in open fire while I draft memos about courage. Silence sat between them, not empty this time. Then Lena said quieter, "And I'm scared of what they'll do to you because you stayed." Darren blinked, caught off guard. She shook her head, frustrated with herself. "You're not my witness. You're not my responsibility to triage. But every time my phone rings after midnight, I assume it's another scene tape, and your name in the first line." He moved closer, slow enough to stop if she pulled back. "I've had worse odds. That's not comforting." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Didn't think it would be." She looked at him, really looked. The controlled posture, the exhaustion hidden in the corners, the kind of restraint that cost him something every hour. "I don't do this," she said. "What?" "Need people." Her voice thinned. "I do cases. I do deadlines and statutes and controlled damage. People are variables. Variables get hurt." Darren considered that, then nodded once. "I got good at leaving before I could fail anyone twice." The confession landed between them like a bridge plank dropped across a gap. Lena reached out before she could overthink it and caught his wrist, thumb against his pulse. "Don't leave this one. I'm here." They stood like that for a moment, too close to call professional, too battered to pretend it meant less than it did. Then her phone rang again. Cam. She answered on speaker. "Tell me you have something good." His voice came thin with road noise. "I have something urgent. Meet me at the old county annex. 20 minutes. Don't use courthouse lot exits." The line went dead. Lena and Darren looked at each other. Whatever fragile warmth had surfaced in the records room folded back into mission shape. 20 minutes, she said. He nodded. "Let's move." The old county annex sat 3 blocks off the main artery, mostly empty since budget cuts. Cam waited in a shadowed side corridor near a dead vending machine, face pale under a fluorescent flicker. He handed Lena a manila folder without greeting. "Got this from state auditor contact, Quiet Channel." Inside were photocopies of emergency room intake amendments from Harbor Point Medical on the night Evo Marine died. Timestamps overwritten, triage notes altered, one original line blacked out with block redaction. Lena scanned, then stopped. A metadata printout stapled behind the pages showed user credentials for edits entered after midnight. Admin auth. Rally.Dear Dr. Randall Halley. "Jesus," she breathed. Cam nodded. "And there's more. Dispatch logs from that night. First responding unit, reassigned off Pier 9 6 minutes before arrival. Override code from acting command terminal." "Chief Kincaid?" Darren asked. "Terminal tag matches his office login." For one sharp second, hope punched through the day's wreckage. Independent, warrant-backed reintroduction. Exactly what Harrow had demanded. Then Cam said, "I was followed getting this." All 3 went still. "2 vehicles," he continued. "One peeled off near the cannery. One stayed on me till bridge ramp. Plate came back to a shell rental tied to Voss subsidiary." Lena snapped the folder shut. "We copy, seal, and file tonight with state judge, not local." "I already called a clerk in Albany," Cam said. "Slot at 7:30 tomorrow if we can get there alive." A crash sounded in the corridor behind them, metal on tile. They turned as one. 2 men in maintenance coveralls came around the corner too fast, faces half hidden by caps. One carried a pry bar. The other had zip ties looped around his wrist like bracelets. Not maintenance. Darren moved first, shoving Lena behind the vending machine as the pry bar swung. It glanced off concrete where her head had been, throwing sparks. Cam slammed the folder into Darren's chest and charged the second man, driving him into a door frame. The zip ties scattered. "Go!" Cam shouted. "Back stairwell." Darren didn't argue. He grabbed Lena's arm and pulled her down the service stairs, two at a time, footsteps thundering above them. At the landing, Lena slipped on damp concrete. Darren caught her before she hit. They burst through the basement exit into alley rain and ran for Darren's borrowed sedan parked 2 blocks away. By the time they reached the car, both were breathing hard and soaked through. Lena slammed the door, shaking. "Cam, he bought us time." Darren started the engine. His hands were steady. His eyes were not. His phone lit up on the dash as he pulled from the curb. Unknown number. Then a text arrived from the same masked relay service that had targeted Tasha's family. A photo loaded. Tasha Green, hoodie up, seated in the back of what looked like a van, eyes red, mouth tight. In the corner of the image, a digital timestamp, 30 seconds ago. Below it, one line, "No dog, no girl, no testimony." Lena made a sound Darren had never heard from her, small, involuntary, terror stripped of polish. Another message came before either could speak. "Court at 9. Be smart this time." Darren looked in the rearview mirror, then at the rain-slick street ahead, and accelerated into traffic as the city lights blurred and the night closed in around them. Darren cut across 2 lanes, tires hissing on rain-slick asphalt, while Lena kept her eyes on the glowing phone screen like she could force it to give up more than terror. "Zoom in," Darren said. She pinched the image of Tasha. Grainy, low light, but there, behind Tasha's shoulder, half obscured by shadow, was a white stencil on metal, EVID-K 9 Bay 2. Lena went cold. "County Kennels." Darren's jaw flexed. "Rook." Her thumb flew over the keyboard. She sent the image, the text thread, and live location share to 3 people in under 15 seconds. Cam, the state clerk in Albany, and Judge Harrow's emergency line. Then she sent one more message to the anonymous number. "We're coming." She signs, dog disappears, nobody talks. You get what you want. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. "Come alone. Back gate. 15 minutes. "Good," she said through her teeth. "They're confident." "Cam's not answering?" "He will." He took the service road toward county storage buildings, lights off for the last block. The storm had thinned to mist, but the air still smelled like hot metal and tide rot. When they rolled to a stop behind the evidence kennel's chain-link perimeter, they could see one municipal van backed up to the loading bay and a black SUV idling with no headlights. 2 men in maintenance coveralls stood by the ramp. Another figure paced near the bay door, agitated, smoking with jerky motions. Mason Kincaid. "Of course," Lena whispered. Darren checked the borrowed sedan's glove box. Flashlight, tire iron, registration papers. Nothing else? "No local 911, Lena said. "If no one's in this, local dispatch tips him." She held up her phone. "I'm live streaming to a secure state upload. If this dies, it still goes." Darren nodded once. "Stay behind me." She gave him a look that said absolutely not, opened her door, and stepped into the wet dark first. "Harbor Point District Attorney's Office," she called, voice sharp enough to crack glass. "Nobody moves." Mason spun, cigarette dropping. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Looking for a kidnapped witness." Lena kept walking, phone up, lens pointed straight at him. "And a court-ordered, neutral custody K-9 asset being removed without authorization." From the shadow of the bay, Nolan Kincaid stepped into view in a raincoat over plain clothes, expression carved from contempt. "You are interfering with police operations, Counselor." "Acting Chief," Lena corrected. "And this is not a police operation. There's no docket number, no judicial transport order, and no lawful reason for a witness to be in your kennel bay at midnight. One of the coverall men moved toward her. Darren shifted between them so fast the man checked himself. Kincaid's voice went hard. "Brooks, you are in over your head." Darren didn't answer. Mason jabbed a finger toward Lena. "She wasn't supposed to be here. You said she'd stall it till morning." There was a tiny, fatal silence. Lena took one step closer, camera steady. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid. Keep talking." Nolan cut his son a look full of murder. "Shut up." From inside the van came a muffled thud. Then another. Then a strangled sound that might have been Tasha trying not to cry out. Lena moved for the van. A coverall man grabbed her arm. Darren was on him before Lena even felt pain. Wrist trap, pivot, shoulder drive into the side panel. The second man swung a pry bar. Darren ducked. Metal rang off steel where his skull had been. Mason backed up swearing, fumbling for his phone. Kincaid drew a compact pistol and pointed it low at Darren. "Stop. Now." Lena did not scream. She did not freeze. She turned her phone so the lens framed Kincaid's face and weapon, and said clearly, "Nolan Kincaid, I am recording you aiming a firearm during an unlawful witness detention. This stream is off-site." For the first time, he hesitated. Sirens rose in the distance, faint, then growing. Kincaid's eyes flicked toward the road. "You stupid—" Lena yanked free, ran to the van, and ripped open the rear door. Tasha was inside, wrists cinched with zip ties, duct tape half peeled from her sleeve where she'd been fighting it. Beside her, in a transport crate with a mesh muzzle strapped too tight, Rook slammed forward once, then held when he saw Darren. "Tasha, look at me." Lena climbed in, hands shaking but precise. "I'm cutting these. You're okay. You're with me." "I didn't tell—" Tasha gasped. "I didn't tell them anything." "I know." Lena sawed through the ties with a small folding knife from her trial bag. "You did everything right." Outside, someone shouted. A body hit pavement. Mason yelled, "Dad!" Darren had disarmed the pry bar man and kicked the tool out under the SUV. Kincaid still had the pistol, now up at chest height, but his angle was blocked by his own son stumbling in front of him. "Drop it!" a voice boomed from the gate. State troopers flooded the yard in gray rain gear, weapons drawn. Behind them came Cam, blood crusted at his hairline, one hand pressed to his ribs, very much alive. Kincaid's face went waxy. He looked at Lena, at the troopers, at the phone still filming. "You set me up." Lena stepped down from the van with Tasha behind her and answered flatly, "No. You walked yourself into daylight." Kincaid lowered the gun by inches, then let it fall. Troopers moved in, cuffing him while he cursed everyone from Albany to hell. Mason fought harder, twisting and shouting, "You can't arrest me. You know who—" A trooper pinned him to the hood. "Yeah," he said, "we do." Darren opened Rook's crate, removed the muzzle, and gave one quiet command. "Heel." Rook stepped down and pressed to Darren's leg, eyes bright, body vibrating but controlled. Lena finally let herself breathe. Cam limped to her, managed a crooked grin. "Told you I had something good." She looked from Cam to Tasha to Darren and Rook standing in the rain under rotating blue lights, and for the first time in days she believed morning might actually come. Morning came hard and merciless in Courtroom 3. By 9, every seat was filled again. This time nobody laughed. Judge Harrow took the bench with a stack of emergency filings and a face like iron. "Before we proceed," he said, "the court has received overnight submissions from the State Attorney General's office regarding witness abduction, attempted evidence conversion, and interference with judicial orders." Murmurs rippled. Harrow slammed his gavel once. Silence. "Mr. Gleason," he said, eyes on defense counsel, "you may explain why your client's family members appear in those submissions." Gleason stood, immaculate as ever. Your Honor, allegations are not findings. We object to prejudicial contamination. Sit down, Harrow said, voice low and lethal. You'll get your chance. Lena rose. She looked like she hadn't slept at all, because she hadn't. The people moved to admit re-warranted marina evidence and derivative forensic extraction. Chain of custody was re-established at 312 under state supervision. We further moved to introduce authenticated hospital audit logs, dispatch override records, and audiovisual material recovered from defendant-adjacent devices. Gleason objected to everything. He called it prosecutorial theater, politically motivated overreach, contaminated digital handling, trauma-driven narrative construction. He adapted, escalated, fought every inch. Harrow heard 2 hours of argument, then ruled point by point. The phone video came in. The audio came in. The ER tampering logs came in. Dispatch override data came in. Rook was approved as a controlled witness support canine under strict conditions. By lunch, Darren was on the stand. Gleason came at him with a scalpel smile. Mr. Brooks, are you asking this jury to trust your interpretation of animal behavior while you are actively treated for combat-related psychiatric symptoms? Darren met his eyes. I'm asking the jury to compare documented training markers with observed behavior. It's not about my feelings. Do you experience insomnia? Yes. Hypervigilance? Yes. Flashbacks in rain? Yes. Gleason spread his hands to the jury. Thank you. Darren didn't flinch. None of that changes how a conditioned Malinois responds to pressure or assignment memory. Rook entered this courtroom, ignored crowd stimulus, and anchored to a distressed juvenile witness. That is protective task behavior, not drift. Lena followed with clean surgical questions, walking him through command suppression, leash pressure compliance, and why Rook's single-controlled intercept at the kennel was train blocking, not aggression. Then Tasha took the stand. Rook lay beside the witness box, chin on paws, eyes half closed but alert. Tasha's voice trembled, then steadied. She identified all 3 defendants. She described the blows, the laughter, the way one of them had kicked Ivo after he was already down. She described hearing, clear as a bell. Dad fixed the first report. Gleason tried to shred her. Timing, lighting, prior recantation, bias. Tasha looked at him, then at the jury. I recanted because they scared me, she said. That's not confusion. That's fear. On rebuttal, Lena played the marina audio again. The courtroom heard the line in full. Dad already fixed the first report. At counsel table, Mason Kincaid snapped. He shoved back his chair, lunged half out of the rail, and shouted at Tasha, Stop lying! You don't get to ruin us! Rook moved once. No bark, no bite. He stepped between Mason and the witness stand and planted, body angled, a living barrier. Deputies swarmed Mason to the floor. Jurors recoiled. Caleb stared at his hands. Trent looked like he might be sick. Judge Harrow's gavel cracked like gunfire. Remove Mr. Kincaid. Now. When the jury filed out for deliberations, the room buzzed like a live wire. It took 4 hours. At 6:17 p.m., the foreperson stood. On count 1, felony murder, guilty. Caleb Voss closed his eyes. Count 2, conspiracy, guilty. Trent Halley made a broken sound in his throat. Count 3, witness tampering, guilty. Mason, back in restraints, laughed once, high, unbelieving, and spat toward the prosecution table. It landed short. Harrow didn't even look at him. Remand all defendants immediately. As deputies moved, side doors opened, and state investigators entered with folders and cuffs. Douglas Voss, Randall Halley, Nolan Kincaid. The lead agent's voice carried. You are under indictment for obstruction of justice, evidence suppression, and coercion related to municipal contracting and police reporting. For the first time, the fathers looked old. Douglas Voss tried outrage. This is a political stunt. Dr. Halley tried authority. I run this city's hospital. Nolan Kincaid tried silence. Jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. None of it mattered. Metal closed around their wrists anyway. No one in the gallery applauded. They just watched power discover, in real time, that it could bleed. When the room finally emptied, it felt cavernous. Paper cups, legal pads, and abandoned outrage littered the benches. The fluorescent lights hummed like nothing historic had happened. Lena sat at counsel table, elbows on knees, both hands over her face. Darren stood a few feet away with Rook at heel, not crowding her, just there. After a long minute, she looked up. Her eyes were red and dry. I kept waiting for the floor to drop out. Darren nodded. Me too. Cam limped in from the side aisle, arm in a sling now. State AG says they'll hold fathers without bond-pending flight risk hearing. He looked at Lena. You were right not to call local last night. Lena let out a breath that almost became a laugh. Frame that sentence. Tasha appeared near the rail with her aunt and a victim advocate. She looked smaller out of the witness box, just a tired 17-year-old in borrowed courage. Ms. Ortiz? Tasha said softly. Lena stood. Yeah? Tasha swallowed. Thank you for coming for me. Lena's throat worked once. You came back and told the truth anyway. That was the hard part. Tasha glanced at Rook, then at Darren. Can I? She held out a tentative hand. Darren gave a tiny nod. He's good. Rook stepped forward and leaned into Tasha's palm. The girl's shoulders dropped an inch, maybe two. Judge Harrow re-entered briefly with a clerk to place a written order on record. He paused when he saw them, then spoke without ceremony. For the file, he said. This court notes Ms. Green's extraordinary courage under coercive pressure and Mr. Brooks's repeated adherence to lawful process despite direct provocation and personal risk. That restraint preserved this case. He looked at Lena. Counselor Ortiz. Well tried. Then he left as quietly as he'd come. Darren stared at the bench after the judge was gone. Lawful process, he repeated, as if testing the weight of it. Lena stepped beside him. You did that? We did. Outside media shouted, cameras flashed, and Harbor Point started rewriting its self-image in real time. Inside, for one suspended moment, there was only the smell of old wood, wet wool and dog fur, and the sound of people breathing after holding it too long. 3 nights later, after sentencing recommendations were filed and the first wave of appeals promised, Lena knocked on Darren's apartment door with a bottle of cheap red wine and no prepared speech. He opened wearing a gray T-shirt and socks, surprise flashing across his face before he stepped aside. Rook trotted over, tail giving one restrained thump against the wall. Thought you'd be at the office, Darren said. I left before someone handed me another memo. He took the wine, found 2 mismatched glasses, and poured. Rain tapped lightly at the window, gentler now. For a while they stood in the kitchen and talked about nothing urgent. Cam's bruised ego, Harrow's terrifying eyebrows, the fact that the courthouse vending machine still ate dollar bills and gave nothing back. It was almost normal. That made it harder. Lena set her glass down first. I need to say this while I still can. Darren stilled. Okay. She looked at him directly. In that records room, I told you I don't do this. Need people. I meant it. I built a whole life around not needing anyone because needing means losing leverage. A muscle moved in his jaw. He didn't interrupt. When you didn't leave, she continued, voice roughening, I kept waiting for the other half of that story. The part where you decide I'm too much risk, too much damage, too much everything. Darren let out a breath. Lena, no, let me finish. She laughed once, embarrassed and stubborn at the same time. I am very good in court. I am less good in rooms like this, but I don't want to keep pretending this is just case fallout. Silence stretched. Rook lay down between them with a sigh, as if he'd been waiting for both humans to catch up. Darren set his glass aside and leaned both hands on the counter, head bowed for a second before he looked up. I was in a stateside security detail 9 years ago, he said. Port redevelopment whistleblower. We were supposed to move him before dawn. We got bad intel, wrong route, and 2 men on my team died in a parking garage because I trusted a chain of command that had already been bought. Lena held very still. I told myself after that, and after my last deployment, that distance was honorable. Don't get close. Don't promise anything you can't protect. Keep people at arm's length and call it discipline. His voice thinned but didn't break. Then you looked at me in a records room and told the truth, even when it made you look weak. And you asked me not to leave. He took 1 step closer. I'm done leaving. Lena's eyes shone. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I love you. The words came clean, unornamented, like a report finally written right. Not because we won a case, not because trauma bonded us, because you are fierce and tired and honest, and you keep choosing people when systems fail them. And when I picture what comes next, you're in it. She covered her mouth with one hand, then dropped it and laughed through a shaky breath. You picked the direct fire approach. You hate ambiguity. I do. He smiled, small and real. I love you too, Lena. She crossed the space between them and kissed him. Once, hard with relief, then again slower, hands sliding up his shoulders. He held her like he'd been bracing for impact and finally understood this wasn't one. When they broke apart, foreheads touching, she whispered, I'm scared all the time. Me too. Good, she said. Then we're qualified. He huffed a laugh and pulled her in again. Later, they sat on the floor with their backs against the couch, Rook sprawled across both their legs like a warm sandbag. Lena told him about the witness she'd lost years ago. Darren told her the names of the 2 teammates from the garage mission, and didn't look away while he did it. They mapped out practical things, schedules, boundaries, what to do on nights either of them spiraled. No grand vows, just usable promises. When Lena finally stood to leave, Darren walked her to the door. She lingered with one hand on the frame. No more disappearing acts, she said. No more, he answered. She kissed him once more, soft this time. See you in court, Brooks, he grinned. See you at breakfast first, Ortiz. The county clerk's office smelled like toner and old coffee when Darren signed the final adoption papers. Canine designation, ARK-17, now Rook Brooks, the clerk read, stamping each page with bureaucratic finality. You understand this transfer is permanent and all prior municipal claims are extinguished by court order? I understand. Rook sat beside Darren's chair in a new black harness that read, Courthouse Support K-9, in white letters. Lena stood behind them with Cam, who clapped Darren once on the shoulder when the last stamp came down. Congratulations, Cam said. You're officially responsible for 90% of this town's emotional regulation. Rook sneezed. Everyone took that as agreement. 2 weeks later, Courtroom Annex B hosted the pilot session of Harbor Point's Witness Support Program. Not a ribbon cutting. Lena had refused that. But a working orientation with victim advocates, public defenders, and one skeptical judge who changed his mind after watching a shaking assault survivor get through direct testimony with Rook's head under her hand. Darren ran the routine like a mission brief. No one pets without consent from witness and handler. Dog enters after oath. Single command vocabulary. If he blocks, you give space and let deputies do their job. Tasha, now in a community college hoodie, sat in the back taking notes for her internship with victim services. During break, she walked up to Darren and handed him a folded index card. "Didn't want to say this out loud," she said. He opened it later, in careful print. "You believed me before I could believe myself. Thank you." Sentencing day came with rain again. Harrow delivered terms without flourish. Decades for the 3 sons on felony murder and conspiracy. Consecutive enhancements for witness tampering. In separate proceedings, Voss, Halley, and Kincaid entered not guilty pleas on obstruction indictments and were held pending trial under strict conditions and asset freezes. No one was smiling in expensive front rows anymore. After court, Lena and Darren sat in her office while she opened a state records packet marked unsealed by order. Inside was a protected statement filed by Ivo Marin, 18 months before his death. He had named coercive land seizure tactics tied to waterfront parcels, shell companies, and pressured security failures. One attached incident summary made Darren's skin go cold. The parking garage operation from 9 years ago, same development consortium, same families financing web, same whistleblower pipeline that had collapsed. Ivo had known. He had tried to file it safely. Darren set the pages down with careful hands. "All this time I thought that mission was just bad luck and bad command." Lena touched his wrist. "It was engineered." He looked at her, then at Rook asleep under the desk, paws twitching in some dream chase. "He walked into that courtroom carrying a map none of us could see yet." On a gray morning in early spring, Courtroom 3 fell quiet again as a witness approached the stand. A young man this time, shaking so hard he could barely hold the rail. No mud, no chaos, no deputies lunging. Darren gave a hand signal from the side aisle. Rook trotted forward, turned once, and settled beside the witness, steady as a metronome. At counsel table, Lena rose and said, "Whenever you're ready." The witness took one breath, then another, fingers resting in Rook's fur. In the gallery, Darren sat ramrod straight, but no longer hollow, listening as truth entered the record in a voice that held,